Hi. This will be my first video I've made while sitting on a dildo. I have made videos before where I wasn't wearing pants. Uh, not that wasn't the intention. That's just the way it happened. In this case, it really wasn't the intention for sitting on the dildo. It would just happen to be what I was doing. But I thought, you know, the thought occurred to me that I don't have to sit on it and make the video, and I thought, well, why not? You know, because it is a little bit uncomfortable. A little bit. It is both pleasurable and uncomfortable simultaneously. So, why am I doing this? Because this is just another step in the transgressing gender boundaries, you might say. That it's kind of like putting on women's clothes for me. It wasn't necessarily something that I wanted to do. Like I wasn't just like itching. I didn't have an itch to put on women's clothes. I had an itch to find out why I was so unhappy with life. And so I tried putting on women's clothing, and of course, some part of my brain pushed back against that, right? Uh, Even though I at first realized that it was something good. It's like the first time I tried on women's clothing and I looked at myself in the mirror, I had this kind of epiphany, right? And but then later, there were, you know, plenty of times when I felt embarrassed. I felt humiliated, ashamed, those sorts of things. And there are still things that my brain, my mind, whatever, uh, is still averse to, or it still struggles with, you might say. And one of those is the idea of being a wife to a man, uh, especially being submissive. Because I know some wives wear the pants in their relationship, but it's more the idea of being submissive that bothers me, which is kind of what I mean by being the wife. But not just submissive in the relationship, but even just sexually submissive, being penetrated and that sort of thing, and being kind of the object or the recipient. I don't know if that's why, like in the beginning when I first tried things with men, I would give blowjobs, but I when the guy asked if he could put it in my butt, I was always like, no, 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 no. I don't know what that was entirely. In most cases, I feel like I just genuinely didn't want it. But you know, one of the things that I've learned is that anal penetration is a good sexual stimulant, right? It is a sometimes it is its own way to get off. You know, like you can have orgasms just through anal penetration, being penetrated. And then some, but for me, usually it's just an assistance, right? Like when I masturbate, putting something in my butt always helps. Almost always. But still, knowing that, like I don't revel in the idea of being penetrated by a man. I don't think like, oh my god, I can't wait. It's more like, oh, I think this is something I have to try. So, And I imagine that some people might watch this and be like, why, why are you forcing yourself? Hopefully I've gotten that idea across already as to why I'm forcing myself to do things. Uh, and if I were to put it some other way, it would be that it's kind of there is an ideal behind it. There is a kind of belief that, for one, that I shouldn't be averse to these things. That, and in the sense of, like, it's wrong to do it, or this isn't what real men do. Real men don't do this, because this is one of the kind of the main issues. When I get that pushback in my own head, it's usually along those lines of, real men don't do this. But hearing myself say that, I hear how absurd that is, right? I hear how, like, if I imagine I'm sitting here talking to Jesus, and Jesus says, "No, fuck no, I wouldn't put anything in my butt." I'd be kind of like, you seem kind of weak, right? What are you scared of? Because that's what I hear when I hear that. Like, when I hear men say things like that, like, "Oh, I don't want nothing in my butt," I think you sound scared. You sound like you're afraid of something. It's almost like you're afraid you'll like it, or you just don't want people to know that you might like it. I think in some cases that's kind of how it goes. It's more the idea of what other people think. Because he might say to other guys, like, "Yeah, I don't want nothing in my butt," but maybe somewhere in his head he's like, "Yeah, I don't know. That might feel good. That might feel good." Uh, I don't know what men think when they go to get a colonoscopy. I've never heard a man say, "Yeah, I went and got my colonoscopy. Man, that felt damn good." Of course, I've never had a colonoscopy, so I don't know what it feels like. I don't know, you know. I don't know if it's comparable to putting a dildo in your butt, a well lubricated dildo, or a. One of my favorites was to take a beer bottle and fill it up with hot water. Like, put a, not boiling hot water, but heat up some water on a stove, or just get it out of a faucet. You know, fill up the bottle with hot water, lubricate it, and put it in my butt. It's a pretty good feeling. Of course, the thing with glass is, there is a concern about it breaking inside your butthole. So I don't know. With the dildos, I've considered doing something similar, like taking a dildo and just putting it in a pot or something, and getting it nice and warm, and then taking it out, covering it with oil, and I use oil for lubricants, not motor oil. I use things like this. The label's coming off that is coconut oil. So I don't imagine that coconut oil is bad for my insides. I don't know. Actually, at the moment, what I'm using at the moment is this one. This is virgin olive oil. Actually, I don't know if it's virgin. I don't know the difference between virgin olive oil and regular uh, slut olive oil. I was trying to think of a word for not virgin, but I couldn't think of. I don't think there's a word for not virgin, is there? You have a word for virgin, but you don't have a word for not virgin. Uh, yeah. So I actually came back to the bus because I'm working on an article, and I got stuck. I mean, and one of the things that I'm stuck on is how much trans stuff do I want to put in the article? Because the article started out about alchemical symbolism in Shakespeare's Venus and Adonis, which is a poem about a man and a woman. Uh, you might say they're deities. They're not men and women. if you were to just read Adonis's poem, you might think that Adonis is a mortal, not a deity, but that's only if you read his poem. If you look at ancient mythology and religion, you'll see that Adonis is a deity who he dies, but he comes back. He dies and he comes back every year. Because his death and resurrection and reunion with Aphrodite, and this is one of the points that I make in my article, because I feel like it's not enough just to say that the seasons change when he comes back to life, because it's not just that. It's that he's reunited with Aphrodite, or Venus, and that this is what causes the seasonal changes. Because it's her, you might say the changes in nature are her response to his absence and his presence, right? But the article started off being about the use of red and white, and I'm not going to go into that here. But I started to analyze this started off with me suspecting that Shakespeare was versed in alchemical symbolism, that he may have been an alchemist himself, or at least studied with alchemists, or kind of hung out in alchemist circles and that sort of thing, to the point that he knew about the spiritual aspect of alchemy. And because this was something that actually happened, in the Renaissance. I don't know that it happened with Shakespeare, but I do know that I've read that it happened anyways, at least with artists, alchemists, that they congregated in the Palazzo, what is it called? The town hall in Florence, Italy. Yeah, but because I decided, just based on what I know about Venus and Adonis already, that if I'm going to analyze anything that Shakespeare's written, it's going to be that. And it is because when it comes to like closeness and relationship to alchemy, that just at first glance appears to be the closest. But one of the subjects that comes up in this is the subject of the divine hermaphrodite and the transgender or cross-gender behavior of the worshippers of the goddess from ancient Mesopotamia all the way up until ancient Rome, right? Because when you look back at ancient Mesopotamian cultures, you see that the men who served the goddess, where she was Inanna in Sumer and Ishtar in Babylon, they were trans women, essentially. They weren't called that then. The term they used then was Gala, which I think just means priests, or priestess is what it means, apparently. But usually when it's translated, the people translate it as priests, but they were men who dressed as women and took on women's names and that sort of thing. And you can kind of trace the lineage there from Mesopotamia up to ancient Rome, because that goddess, Inanna, who became Ishtar in Babylon, became Astarte in Phoenicia, who became Aphrodite in Greece, who became Venus in Rome. But there are also actually other ones too, because there was the goddess Cybele from Phrygia who came to Rome, but Cybele was just another version of the same goddess that became Venus, and her worshippers castrated themselves. The men castrated themselves and wore women's clothing. So one of the questions that is kind of on my mind as I'm doing the research and writing the article is, how much does that spill over into alchemy? Right? If alchemy is all about transmutation, and I'm not saying that to say, well, that's code for transgender, but it is about transformation, right? Alchemy is about turning lead into gold, right? But it's the alchemist who is the lead, right? This is the idea, is that the alchemist starts off as lead himself or herself and changes themselves into something divine, something pure and perfect, like gold. So gold is considered perfect. I haven't put this into the article yet. I don't know if I'm going to, but gold is considered perfect because it does not oxidize, right? It doesn't tarnish or rust. So it is the picture of contentment. So this was the idea that alchemists had, was that metals that oxidize are in want. There's something they lack, so that this is why they interact with these other elements, and you get these rusts and tarnishes and whatever other sorts of oxidations you find. But gold doesn't do that. Of course, it's not the only metal that doesn't oxidize, but back then they didn't know about every metal that we know about now. So but that's why gold was put up. That was part of it, and the other part of it is its color, right? Because it resembles the sun. The sun has a golden color, right? Because the sun is also the highest, right? You have 7 metals and you have 7 planets. The sun is the highest of the 7 planets, and the gold is the highest of the 7 metals. So, because back then planet didn't mean what it does now either. Planet just meant a heavenly body that doesn't follow the same path as the fixed stars, which they all follow the same path in the sky. I do realize I'm going off on some tangents, but so yeah, one of the questions is how much of the gender stuff do I want to put in this article? And one of the reasons why I'm questioning it is because I don't know myself how much it has to do with. I don't know how much the gender stuff has to do with alchemy. I don't know. Haven't yet found any evidence of alchemists who wore women's clothing or anything like that. I do have evidence of Shakespeare's writing, and how can I put it? But other than to say that some people believe that Shakespeare was a woman because of the way he wrote, right? People question Shakespeare's identity. They say that there's no evidence of a real human being named William Shakespeare at that time, or I think one of the arguments, it's not that wasn't the argument, but that there was a real human being named William Shakespeare, but there's no way that he wrote those poems because he wasn't nearly as educated as the person who wrote the poems, or something like that. And so some people speculate that the person who wrote those poems was a woman, and that was the argument that I read, was that the way Shakespeare writes, the things that he says, writing poems to a man, saying, I'm out here among the flowers, looking at these flowers, and I think of you, and would a man write something like that? Would a real man sit on a dildo and make a video? Or should I say, would a man sit on a dildo and make a video? And talk for 20 minutes with something stuck in his butt? Maybe at the end of the video I'll pull it out and show you the dildo. I don't know. But yeah, I don't know how much of that to. Not only do I not know how much of that is involved with alchemy, but I don't want to take the alchemy out and say, well, this is all about trans, right? And so there is a kind of like balancing act or juggling act where it's like I want to bring this in. I don't want to replace the alchemy stuff. I don't want the point of the article to be that Shakespeare's Venus and Adonis is really about transgender stuff. I don't want it to be that. Because for one, that is a stretch. I mean, if you read the poem, you wouldn't, just reading it, you wouldn't be like, where, you'd be like, where is the trans stuff in here? What are you talking about? I think I did forget to mention the whole red and white part of it, because that was why I decided to research the poem, and what made me think that it was an alchemical allegory is the use of red and white in the poem, because it shows up. I used Python, the programming language, to count words in the poem, right? And I found that there are 199 stanzas in the poem, and in 13 of those, red and white appear together, which is not usual. And an example of that is in the very beginning. It's like the second stanza. Venus says of Adonis, "You are the chief flower of the field, more white and red than doves or roses are." Well, what does that mean? Why would someone describe a man as more white and red than doves or roses are? So that's not necessarily an alchemical thing. It's not necessarily alchemy, but red and white are symbols in alchemy, right? They're symbols for the masculine and feminine principle. That the process of transmutation in alchemy, turning lead into gold, involves uniting the masculine and feminine elements, which is why I go into the divine hermaphrodite. Because if you look at pictures of alchemy, like if you just Google alchemy transmutation and look just for the images, don't look for the links, you'll likely see pictures of a hermaphrodite somewhere in those results. Of course, you can just Google alchemy hermaphrodite if you wanted to, and you'll see plenty of pictures of a hermaphrodite as part of the process of alchemical transmutation. But the alchemist in some case, or the hermaphrodite in some cases, will be pictured with red and white, right? Because red and white, like I said, represent the two components that are put together into the hermaphrodite. So the red is for the masculine, so they sometimes call him the Red King, and then the white is the queen. So it's the Red King and the White Queen, right? These are the two that come together in marriage, but they create a new person, right? So when I see red and white together constantly, in the poem, by constant I mean, like I said, 13 out of 199 stanzas, and each stanza is 6 lines or 7 lines, I forgot. That to me is fairly constant from the beginning to the end, because it's the second stanza is the first instance, and then the last stanza is the last instance of red and white appearing together. Right. And even now, I'm not sure what to make of that, because it's clear in some instances that they don't mean gender, but gender in the ancient times had a slightly different meaning than it does now, because as evident in language, like say Spanish, French, Latin, everything has gender, right? When I say that it's evident in that, you can look at the language itself, because these languages have gender to describe the universe, right? So like water is feminine. When you look at the Latin word for water, or the Spanish word for water, you see that it's a feminine noun, right? And so for red and white in Shakespeare, red and white as symbols of gender don't necessarily mean, or are not necessarily used as, like, meaning of like a guy wearing lipstick. If that makes sense. Because in the alchemical view, being dry is masculine, wet is feminine, hot is masculine, cold is feminine, and so it's used that way in the poem. In some instances, where white is used to mean frosty or frigid, and red is used to mean hot and things like that. But it's still there as a couple, right? So, because of that, I can't. This is one of the reasons why I can't really say, well, it's about trans, it's about men being hermaphrodites. That's not a great argument to make for that. I mean, it's there, but I don't know that that should be the point of my article. I think, if anything, the point should be that alchemical symbolism is in the poem, and part of alchemical symbolism is the hermaphrodite stuff. So that's why I came back to my bus. I was out working at Starbucks on the article, and I just felt stuck, and I thought I need to go take a break. I've been over here for 4 hours, and I think I've had too much coffee. And so I came back to the bus, decided I would sit down on a dildo, and then decided to make a video. So and I didn't even mention my issue at work. I have an issue at work with an employee, a man, who I'm in a power struggle with, you might say. He doesn't like being told what to do. I am his manager, an assistant manager, but still his manager. And this is one of those instances where when I see myself as a girl or just putting on a wig, I feel like I've automatically forfeited my respectability, right? Like, who would respect someone like me? And this is one of the issues that I'm dealing with, which is another reason for me to say, yeah, I think sitting on a dildo might be a good idea, because I'm obviously I myself have a low opinion of trans, right? So what does that mean for me if I am really trans? And what do I do about it? This is one of the issues that I have with trans, is that trans are constantly, I shouldn't say constantly, because I don't want to say this about all trans, but when I see trans in the news, or I hear some of the things that they say from the media, it's almost always things like they want other people to change how they respond to trans. They want to be called the right gender and the right name and all these other sorts of things. But you don't often hear trans people saying that trans need to respect themselves, right? That one of the biggest problems for trans is their own internalized transphobia. So, if I have internalized transphobia, which it appears that I do, what is the way to deal with that? Is it just to say, oh, no, I'm a man, I can live as a man, despite the fact that after 48 years of living, I've never had anything close to a life. But yeah, I can live as a man. It's possible. The evidence points to me being trans. What is the evidence? The improved sexual experiences that I have, the feeling that I can now have relationships, or at least that it looks possible. It looks like relationships are a possibility. Uh, Whereas relationships in the past just never worked for me. And when I think about why it was that they never worked for me, it comes back to this idea of me being in hiding. I don't know necessarily. I'm not going to necessarily. I don't necessarily mean to say that it was the trans stuff that I was hiding. There might be other things that I was hiding, but that's how I feel when I see myself like this. It feels like it is in a way like coming out of the closet. It is there. I don't feel as much like I'm hiding. I go to work. A man with boobs. You see that I have boobs? And it's uncomfortable. And people might say, well, if it's uncomfortable, why do it? Uh, because it is a kind of long-term thing, right? It's going through short-term pain for long-term gain. That's kind of the idea. But that wasn't the point that I was trying to make there. What I was going for, though, was that even despite it being uncomfortable, that I feel less like I'm hiding. That this feeling that I have something to hide, just, I wouldn't say it goes out the window, but it's not as debilitating as it used to be. Just knowing that people can see me with breasts. No. So, but this is kind of where my life is at the moment, where it's uncomfortable to go out with breasts, but I see that it's beneficial to my life. That was kind of the opposing forces there. That's what that was. This is the force pulling me in one direction and the force going in the other direction. That's what that was. All right, I think it's time to stop. Do you want to see it? Oh, now I feel like it's stuck now. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get it out. But of course... Oh my god, it stinks. Alrighty. Hopefully you could hear it coming out. I'm not going to use that finger. I'm going to use my knuckle.